Imagine this. A huge assembly hall, Fort Worth, Texas. High-tech military gear being built, right? F-35s. But suddenly, silence. Total silence. The line's dead. And the reason? Someone leans in and says, believe it or not, we're out of magnets.
It sounds almost like something out of a movie, doesn't it? But that was the reality hitting the U.S. defense industry just overnight.
Yeah.
Somewhere out there, those critical shipments, the processed rare earths that are like the magnetic heart of modern defense tech, frozen, a strategic move from Beijing, totally unexpected.
We're talking a massive immediate shock. Systemic. Within hours, missile lines stalled. F-35 production just stopped.
Yeah.
Phones must have been ringing like crazy at the Pentagon.
Absolutely.
And we've got this stunning number from our sources, 78%.
Yeah.
78% of the U.S. defense industry went dark almost instantly because of these new Chinese export controls.
Right. And look, this analysis isn't just about some temporary trade argument. No, this is a cold, hard look at a new strategic weapon emerging.
Weaponizing materials.
Exactly. Weaponizing indispensable materials. It's a huge structural crisis for supply chains everywhere. So what we're doing here is a rapid analysis of this massive shift. We're digging into the specific damage, military and economic, why this imbalance exists, this asymmetry, and the serious risks, for both Washington and Beijing. You really need this info to get what's happening with global power dynamics right now.
Okay, before we get deeper into all that, folks, please take a second right now, hit subscribe. If you want analysis that cuts through the noise, gives you the facts you need, make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe now. All right, let's start with the immediate crisis. The trigger seemed almost clinical. Beijing freezes shipments of processed rare earths. They applied new export licensing to anything with over 0.1% rare earths by value. Why is that specific number, 0.1%, so devastating?
The 0.1% threshold, that's the key, really. It seems small, but it's actually an extremely low bar. It means the ban isn't just hitting, bulk raw materials. It's designed to catch pretty much every modern high-tech component that needs these minerals. Think actuators, sensors, and yes, those high-performance magnets.
So it just stopped everything.
It effectively stopped everything, yeah.
And the dominoes fell instantly in the defense sector. We got confirmed reports almost immediately, production slowdowns at 3 huge contractors. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman.
And it's a delay that just gets worse exponentially.
How so?
Well, the analysis shows that for every single week of supply delay for these complex systems, the overall delivery schedule gets pushed back by 1.8 weeks.
Wow, nearly double.
Yeah. So you can see how quickly the military readiness clock just starts running down. It's serious.
And the Pentagon's reaction really shows how desperate things got.
Yeah.
Fast. They had to reallocate existing rare earth stockpiles.
That's right. Stuff originally set aside for important naval radar upgrades, they had to pull those just to keep basic air defense production going.
Pulling from long-term projects just to keep the lights on today, essentially.
Pretty much. Just to keep existing production schedules barely afloat. And that scramble really brings us to the core problem, this deep structural imbalance that let the crisis happen in the first place.
We've got the September 2025 U.S. Geological Survey data right here. And yeah, the imbalance is just staggering. The U.S., it holds about 15% of the world's rare earth ore reserves.
We have the rocks, right?
We have the rocks, but
we refine less than 10% of the global supply.
And that's the crucial difference, isn't it? It's like having oil in the ground, but no working refinery. China, on the other hand, processes over 90% of the world's rare earths.
90%.
And here's the really critical part. They control 98% of the heavy grades.
Okay, wait. Why are the heavy grades so specifically important for defense? What makes them different?
It really comes down to performance under extreme conditions. Heavy rare earths like dysprosium and terbium, they're essential because they keep their strong magnetism even when things get really hot or stressed.
You absolutely need that for precision guidance and missiles, for tiny, powerful electronics, and for the motors inside jet actuators. The entire U.S. defense setup relies almost completely on this very niche processing capacity that, well, for decades, we basically chose to outsource.
So China used this industrial power, but they used the same legal argument Washington did.
That's maybe the strategic genius or perhaps the strategic hypocrisy of it all.
Yeah.
Beijing pointed directly to national security, the same justification Washington used back in 2023 for restricting advanced semiconductor exports.
Right, I remember that.
So by mirroring the legal language, Beijing kind of neutralizes Washington's ability to claim the moral high ground. It perfectly shows how both sides are now using interdependence as a weapon, all under that same national security banner.
In the financial markets.
Yeah.
They definitely saw this as a long-term structural problem, not just a blip. Looking at the reaction on October 17th, rare earth prices in Shanghai jumped, what, 41%
Yeah.
in one
A
day?
huge surge, yeah. And contrast that with U.S. defense suppliers, their shares dropped nearly 9% that same day. It signals investors aren't thinking, oh, this is temporary. No, they see a fundamental shift in global risk. Material security is suddenly just as vital as, say, IT security.
And the pain wasn't just military. We saw big civilian industries scrambling too. GM, Tesla, Boeing,
Right.
all asking Beijing for special export licenses.
That's right. They needed neodymium and praseodymium, crucial stuff for EV motors and aircraft actuators.
Did they get them?
China did approve some licenses, yes, but, and this is key, they capped them, only 6-month validity.
6 months.
Analysts started calling it the short leash.
Apt.
It really demonstrates China's power to, control the pace of foreign manufacturing without a full decoupling. It forces these huge companies into this cycle of dependence and constant renegotiation.
But surely this weapon cuts both ways. I mean, China has massive leverage, but is a long embargo really risk-free for Beijing? We have to talk about mutual pain here.
Oh, not at all risk-free. The leverage is immense, sure, but the economic cost for China isn't nothing. Our sources suggest Chinese manufacturers, the ones who depend on foreign assembly, particularly in Europe, they'll start feeling their own bottlenecks.
Okay.
And China makes roughly $13 billion a year just from rare earth exports. That's not pocket change.
$13 billion. Okay, it sounds significant, but compared to China's overall GDP, is that really enough to stop them if they think this gives them a decisive strategic edge over the U.S.?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Or rather, the $13 billion question. That's the price of the leverage. They might be willing to absorb that economic hit for a while if it forces the U.S. to pour massive resources, like that estimated $17 billion in years of strategic effort into building redundant supply chains.
Speaking of Washington, the contradiction they're facing is stark. The Treasury's own white paper basically admits it, right?
Yeah.
What did it highlight?
Yeah, the Treasury report is quite blunt. It explicitly says China's dominance is a systemic risk to U.S. defense readiness. It lays bare the geopolitical catch-22. To maintain global deterrence against rivals, the U.S. needs these specific rare earths. But it depends on the very nation it's trying to strategically contain. It's a profound vulnerability.
Meanwhile, the rest of the world is kind of fracturing under this pressure. The IMF is warning that if this standoff continues, global manufacturing could shrink by 0.4%. That sounds small, but it's actually pretty significant globally.
It is. And Europe, which gets, 98% of its magnets from China, they're really torn.
98%? Wow.
Germany, especially with its huge car industry and EV dependence, they publicly said, look, de-risking doesn't mean decoupling. EU analysts are being realistic, admitting replacing China's refining capacity is, frankly, decades away.
Decades.
It really highlights this idea of global bifurcation, the world splitting into U.S.-aligned and China-aligned economic zones. Europe seems to be trying desperately to keep a foot in both camps.
And we're even seeing signs of strategic evasion being used almost like a reward system. Satellite data suggests Beijing isn't applying the ban uniformly.
Exactly. It looks like they're selectively enforcing it, redirecting some refined shipments through third-party countries in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Vietnam specifically.
Why do that?
Well, it's more than just hiding where things come from. It's geopolitical signaling. By rewarding neutral partners, Beijing is basically saying, align with us and you get resource stability. It isolates Washington even further.
Since understanding this is so critical for grasping these real-world strategic shifts, we just want to quickly remind you again, subscribe now. Don't miss out on these essential insights. Okay, let's shift gears. What about efforts to fix this dependency, the race to diversify? How big is the policy gap we're looking at?
It's huge. Massive, really. Remember the U.S. critical mineral strategy, launched with a lot of fanfare back in 2022.
Right, the goal was to end Chinese processing dependency by 2030.
Exactly. But the Government Accountability Office reported in July 2025 that only about 12% of that goal has actually been met.
Only 12%. That's not good.
No. The underlying assumption that just market incentives would magically rebuild this critical refining industry, it completely crashed against geopolitical reality and, frankly, the sheer complexity of chemical engineering.
But building that capacity domestically isn't cheap or fast, I assume.
Not at all. Estimates put the cost at up to $17 billion, with a minimum of 5 years just to get basic domestic refining up and running. And it's complicated stuff. U.S. projects are bogged down in environmental reviews, plus they're competing against the massive economies of scale China built over 20 years.
But our allies are moving,
Yeah.
maybe with more urgency given past experiences.
Yes, some are. Australia's Lynas, they provide about 15% of the world's refined output, but their capacity is chemically limited. They focus more on lighter rare earths, not the heavy ones defense needs so much. They can't just, flip a switch and produce more heavy grades.
Okay.
India has reserves, yes, but they lack the processing infrastructure. That needs maybe $4-6 billion and probably 4 years to build out.
And Japan. They faced a similar Chinese embargo before, didn't they, back in 2010?
Precisely. Japan learned a very hard lesson a decade ago. So now they're moving fast. They've announced subsidies to triple their domestic magnet recycling output by 2027.
Recycling. Interesting angle.
They realize recycling is the quickest way to buffer against supply shocks. It's an example of hedging, of pragmatism that maybe others need to adopt more seriously.
Okay, so let's look at the diplomatic front. It sounds like things are completely stuck. We saw the Trump administration announce retaliatory measures, a 100% tariff on Chinese electronics. That just deepens the split.
It absolutely accelerates this global bifurcation, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And attempts by the Treasury Department to coordinate with allies to pressure China for long-term export guarantees, they've hit a brick wall.
Why?
Leak memos confirm it. Beijing's demand is clear. Lift the U.S. restrictions on advanced semiconductors first. And that's the mutually exclusive red line. Washington won't lift the chip restrictions. They see them as vital for national security. Beijing won't budge on rare earths without that concession. So diplomacy is effectively frozen solid.
Which brings us back to that paradox resource analysts talk about.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. has the rocks, the ore, like at Mountain Pass in California.
Mm-hmm.
But China has the know-how, the complex chemical refining technology.
Mm-hmm.
The real choke point isn't a lack of the raw material itself. It's the scarcity of refining capacity and the IP behind it.
Exactly. And just when you think the chessboard is set, there's one final strategic twist emerging from the sources. Russia.
Oh, Russia. How do they fit in?
Reportedly, Russia has offered to sell refined rare earth metals to the United States, but only through third-party intermediaries in Central Asia.
Okay, wait. Selling through third parties.
Yeah.
That would violate existing sanctions against Russia, wouldn't it?
It certainly appears it would. And that forces a really tense debate inside Washington. Does strategic necessity, getting the materials absolutely vital for defense, override diplomatic principle and commitments to allies?
Wow. That's the ultimate test of realism versus principle.
It really is. And this whole question of dependency brings us right back to where we started. Let's revisit that assembly hall in Fort Worth.
Right. The lights flicker back on, but only briefly. A small emergency shipment arrives from Japan, the result of intense diplomatic effort. But it's only enough material for maybe a week's production.
Barely a patch.
And that Department of Defense official, his quote just sums it all up. Why the U.S. got into this mess. Because it was cheaper.
That one line captures it all, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
political cost of decades worshipping efficiency, prioritizing short-term cost savings over long-term strategic resilience. That calculation has now turned a simple supply chain problem into a massive national security liability.
So, as those workers unload crates marked alternative supply, emergency use only, the big question remains, for you listening, how long can we keep calling the non-Chinese supply of these critical materials alternative? Before that just had to become the norm.
We really hope this analysis has given you some critical insight into the structural crisis playing out across global manufacturing and defense right now.
Yes, and if you found this essential, please subscribe now to The Deep Dive. Join us next time. Thanks for listening.